The transport ship's cargo bay hummed with the low vibration of hyperspace engines, but Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen barely noticed. He sat against a crate of supplies, methodically cleaning his rifle for the third time since they'd left Earth orbit. The weapon looked ancient compared to the sleek energy rifles carried by his alien teammates. A simple bolt-action design that his grandfather might have recognized, albeit with a few modern improvements. Across the bay, 3 members of the Galactic Defense Corps watched him with barely concealed amusement. The tallest was Vex 9, a reptilian saurian whose scales shifted from green to blue when he was entertained. Next to him stood Lyra, a graceful ethereal whose translucent skin seemed to glow with an inner light. The third was Grunt Commander Thok, a heavily muscled being from the warrior planet Korath, whose 4 arms made him look like he could tear a battle tank in half. "Look at the human!" Vex 9 hissed, his voice carrying the typical saurian lisp. "Still polishing that primitive projectile weapon. How quaint!" Lyra's melodic laugh tinkled like wind chimes. "I've read their history. They still use chemical propellants and metal bullets. Such a backward species." Thok grunted and flexed 2 of his 4 arms. "My plasma cannons can vaporize a target from 3 kilometers. That human toy probably can't even penetrate modern armor." Marcus heard every word. His face remained impassive as he continued his weapon maintenance, though his jaw tightened slightly. He'd been assigned to this joint operation as part of humanity's integration into the Galactic Defense Corps, and the reception had been less than warm. 3 weeks into the mission, and his teammates still treated him like a curiosity rather than a soldier. The briefing had been clear enough. The planet Zarian 7 had been overrun by void spawn, nightmare creatures from another dimension that consumed everything in their path. The Galactic Defense Corps had lost 2 entire divisions, trying to retake the planet's capital city. Now they were sending in small infiltration teams to gather intelligence and hit strategic targets. Marcus's team was designated Strike Force Omega, tasked with reaching the planet's main communication array and gathering data on void spawn movement patterns. It should have been a routine reconnaissance mission, but everyone knew the casualty rates for operations on Zarian 7 were over 80%. "Attention all personnel," came the ship's announcement in the standard galactic trade language. "We are approaching the Zarian system. Drop pods will launch in 30 minutes. Marcus finished reassembling his rifle and stood up, slinging the weapon across his back. He checked his gear one more time: ammunition, field rations, water purification tablets, medical supplies, and a small device that looked like an oversized smartphone. The device was humanity's latest contribution to galactic technology, a quantum entanglement communicator that provided instantaneous communication across any distance. "At least the humans got one thing right," Vex 9 admitted, noticing Marcus checking the communicator. "These quantum devices are quite impressive." "Pity they couldn't apply the same innovation to their weapons technology," Lyra added. Marcus finally spoke up. "This rifle has been killing things efficiently for over a century. Sometimes simple works better than complicated." Thok laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Human, I've seen your weapons tests. Your bullets bounce off modern personal shields like raindrops. My plasma cannon would melt that armor you're wearing into slag." "Maybe," Marcus replied calmly. "But your plasma cannon needs a power cell that weighs 15 kilograms and only gives you 20 shots. My rifle carries 40 rounds and weighs less than your weapon's targeting system." 40 shots that can't penetrate armor," Vex 9 pointed out. Marcus smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. "Who said anything about armor-piercing rounds?" Before anyone could ask what he meant, the ship's alarm began blaring. "All personnel to drop pods immediately. Void spawn have detected our approach. We are under attack." The team rushed to their assigned pod, a sleek vehicle designed for high-speed planetary insertion. As they strapped in, Marcus could see through the viewport that space around their ship was filling with dark, writhing shapes. Void spawn that had somehow learned to survive in the vacuum of space. "How are they doing that?" Lyra gasped, her usually serene demeanor cracking. Void, spawn, adapt, Thok growled. They learn. They evolve. That's why they're so dangerous. The ship shuddered as something large struck the hull. Through the communications system, they could hear the captain shouting orders. All drop pods launch immediately! Repeat, immediate launch! Their pod shot from the ship like a bullet from a gun, spinning through space toward the planet below. Marcus watched through the viewport as their mothership was swarmed by void spawn. The creatures looked like living shadows with too many teeth, and they were tearing through the ship's hull with claws that could cut through quantum-reinforced alloys. The ship's lost, Vex 9 reported, checking his scanner. We're on our own. The pod began its descent through Zarian 7's atmosphere, and Marcus got his first clear look at what had once been a thriving planet. The surface was covered in a black, oily substance that seemed to move on its own. What had once been cities were now twisted spires of corrupted matter that pulsed with an unhealthy red light. Landing zone is hot, the pod's automated system announced. Void spawn detected in the area. Recommend immediate tactical dispersal upon touchdown. The pod hit the ground with bone-jarring force. The 4 team members quickly gathered their gear and prepared to exit. Marcus chambered a round in his rifle and checked his scope settings. Remember the mission, Thok said, his voice unusually serious. Get to the communications array, download the data, and get out. No heroics. They stepped out of the pod onto what had once been a park in the planet's capital city. The grass had been replaced by the same black, oily substance that covered everything else, and the air smelled of sulfur and decay. In the distance, they could see their target, a massive tower that stretched into the sky like a silver needle. 2 kilometers, Lyra reported, checking her scanner. But we've got company. From behind the corrupted remains of trees and buildings, shapes began to emerge. Void spawn came in many forms, but these looked like wolves the size of horses, with metallic fangs and claws that sparked with energy. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light of Zarion 7's dying sun. Pack hunters, Vex 9 hissed. They're testing us. Thok raised 2 of his plasma cannons. Let them come. I'll show them Korath firepower. The first void spawn charged, moving faster than anything that size had a right to move. Thok's plasma cannons roared, sending brilliant streams of superheated gas toward the creature. The blasts struck true, but the void spawn barely slowed down. Its hide absorbed the energy and converted it into something else, something that made it grow larger and more aggressive. They're adapting to our energy weapons, Lyra shouted, her own particle beam rifle proving equally ineffective. More void spawn emerged from cover, at least a dozen of them circling the team. Their movements were coordinated, intelligent. They had learned to hunt galactic soldiers, and they knew how to counter advanced energy weapons. Vex 9's plasma rifle overheated after a prolonged burst, and he switched to his backup weapon, a crystalline blade that hummed with power. Close combat formation, he ordered. That's when Marcus stepped forward, his primitive rifle steady in his hands. The other team members barely noticed him as they focused on the approaching creatures. But Marcus had been studying the void spawn during the entire firefight, watching how they moved, how they reacted. The lead void spawn, the largest of the pack, focused its attention on Thok, who was wielding 2 plasma cannons like pistols. The creature gathered itself to spring, muscles bunching under its corrupted hide. Marcus's rifle cracked once. The sound was different from the energy weapons, sharper, more final. The bullet, a specially designed tungsten core armor-piercing round, struck the void spawn just behind its left foreleg. The creature stumbled, looked confused, and then collapsed as the round found its heart. The pack stopped advancing. They looked at their fallen leader, then at the human with the primitive weapon. For a moment there was silence except for the wind blowing across the corrupted landscape. "How did you do that?" Lyra whispered. Marcus chambered another round. They adapt to energy. They absorb it, convert it, use it to grow stronger. But they've never encountered kinetic energy weapons. Their biology doesn't know how to process a chunk of metal moving at 3,000 feet per second. Another void spawn, emboldened by what it thought was luck, charged directly at Marcus. The rifle cracked again, and the creature dropped mid-stride, a perfect hole through its skull. Impossible, Vex 9 breathed. Your weapon readings show minimal energy output. How are you achieving these kills? Marcus smiled grimly as he acquired his next target. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. These creatures have evolved to fight your advanced weapons. They've never had to deal with a human sniper. The remaining void spawn seemed to sense that something had changed. They began circling wider, trying to flank the team. But Marcus was already tracking them through his scope, calculating wind drift and bullet drop with the same instincts that had kept human hunters alive for millennia. Crack. Another void spawn dropped. Crack. A fourth creature spun and fell, its corrupted blood seeping into the black ground. The rest of the pack retreated, disappearing into the ruins as quickly as they had appeared. They had encountered something their adaptive biology couldn't understand or counter: the simple, elegant lethality of human ballistic weapons. Remarkable, Thok admitted, lowering his plasma cannons. Your primitive weapon is more effective against void spawn than our most advanced energy weapons. Not primitive, Marcus corrected, checking his ammunition. Specialized. Humans have been perfecting the art of putting projectiles on target for thousands of years. We just never stopped improving. Lyra's scanner beeped urgently. We need to move. Those gunshots will have attracted attention. Every void spawn in the area knows we're here now. The team began moving toward their objective, but the dynamic had changed. Marcus was no longer the weak link trailing behind his technologically superior teammates. He had become their shield against creatures that their own weapons couldn't touch. As they navigated through the ruins of the city, Vex 9 fell into step beside him. Tell me about your training, human. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Texas, Marcus replied simply. Been hunting since I was 8 years old. Learned to shoot from my grandfather, who learned from his grandfather. It's in our blood. Hunting? Lyra asked. You mean you kill animals for sustenance? Sometimes. Mostly for balance. Keep the ecosystem healthy by controlling populations. But it teaches you things you can't learn in a simulator. How to read wind and weather, how to track a target, how to make one shot count because you might not get another. They were interrupted by a distant roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate, and dust fell from the corrupted buildings around them. Alpha-class void spawn, Thok reported grimly. Something big is coming. In the distance, they could see a shape moving through the ruins. It was massive, easily the size of a building, with tentacles that moved like snakes and eyes that burned like stars. The creature was headed directly toward the communications array, their objective. We can't fight that thing, Vex 9 said. We need to find another route. Marcus studied the creature through his scope. It moved slowly, but with purpose, and its hide looked thick enough to stop any weapon they carried. But as he watched, he noticed something else. Smaller void spawn were following in its wake, feeding off its energy field. No, he said finally. We fight it. But not the way you think. Are you insane? Lyra demanded. That thing could swallow our entire team without noticing. Marcus was already moving, heading for a partially collapsed building that would give him a clear line of sight to the approaching creature. Trust me, he called back. Sometimes the biggest target isn't the most important one. The rest of the team had no choice but to follow, though their confidence in the humans' plan was questionable at best. None of them could imagine how primitive projectile weapons could possibly harm something that size. But Marcus Chen had been studying void spawn tactics for the entire mission, and he had noticed something that the galactic databases had missed. something that might just save all their lives, if his aim was true. The hunt was about to begin. Marcus scaled the rubble-strewn stairs of the collapsed building with practiced ease, his rifle slung across his back. The structure had once been an office complex, but void-spawn corruption had twisted it into something resembling a spiral shell. The twisted architecture actually worked in his favor, providing multiple vantage points and concealment. Behind him, his alien teammates climbed more slowly, their advanced weapons and armor making them less agile in the treacherous terrain. Thok's heavy plasma cannons kept catching on debris, while Lyra's flowing robes snagged on the corrupted metal that grew like cancer from the walls. "Human, explain your strategy," Vex 9 demanded, as they reached what had once been the building's 5th floor. "That creature is impervious to energy weapons. Its hide is 3 meters thick and composed of adaptive biomatter." Marcus found a window opening that gave him a clear view of the approaching Alpha-class void spawn. Through his scope, he could see the massive creature in detail. It moved like a living mountain, each step causing small earthquakes. Its tentacles swept constantly back and forth, clearing a path through the ruins. But Marcus wasn't looking at the creature itself. He was studying the smaller void spawn that followed in its wake. "You're right," he said, adjusting his scope for the distance. "We can't hurt the big one directly, but look at the little ones." The others gathered around, using their enhanced vision and scanners to observe the creature's entourage. Dozens of smaller void spawn moved in a precise formation around the Alpha, like soldiers escorting a tank. "They're feeding off its energy field," Lyra observed, "drawing power from the Alpha to sustain themselves." "Exactly," Marcus said, chambering around. "And what happens to a circuit when you start removing components?" Thok's 4 eyes widened in understanding. "The load becomes too great for the remaining components. They overload and fail." "But even if we could kill the smaller ones," Vex 9 protested, "your weapon can't possibly eliminate them all fast enough. There are too many, and they're spread out over a wide area." Marcus smiled and pulled out what looked like a standard ammunition magazine. But when he showed it to the others, they could see that these rounds were different. Instead of the typical copper-jacketed bullets they'd seen him use before, these had dark metallic tips with strange markings. "Depleted uranium cores," he explained, "dense enough to punch through almost anything, and radioactive enough to poison whatever they hit. One round can kill multiple targets if they're energy-linked." "Radioactive?" Lyra stepped back in alarm. "Those weapons are banned by Galactic treaty." "On most worlds, yes," Marcus agreed. "But the void spawn aren't technically alive in the biological sense. They're energy constructs with physical forms. Radiation disrupts their coherence matrix." The Alpha-class creature was now only 800 meters away, and the ground shook with each of its massive footsteps. Windows in nearby buildings shattered from the vibrations, and the corrupted metal began to sing with harmonic resonance. Marcus took a deep breath and settled into his shooting position. Through his scope, he could see the energy patterns flowing between the Alpha and its escorts. The smaller void spawn weren't just following randomly. They were positioned at specific points that created a stable energy network. "Key nodes," he muttered, identifying his targets. "Take out the right ones in the right order, and the whole system collapses." His first shot took out a void spawn that was positioned at what looked like a crucial intersection of energy lines. The creature dropped instantly, and Marcus could see the energy field around the Alpha flicker slightly. "Did you see that?" Thok asked excitedly. The creature's power output decreased by approximately 3%. Marcus was already lining up his second shot. "It's like a support network. Each small one carries part of the load. Remove enough of them, and the Alpha can't maintain its stability." The second shot dropped another key node, and this time the effect was more pronounced. The Alpha stumbled slightly, its massive form wavering as if it were losing coherence. "Incredible," Vex 9 breathed. "Your primitive weapon is achieving what our most advanced theoretical physics said was impossible." "Not primitive," Marcus corrected again, acquiring his third target. "Evolved. Humans have been hunters for millions of years. We know how to find weakness in prey that's bigger and stronger than we are." The third shot caused a cascade effect. The depleted uranium round not only killed its target, but disrupted the energy flow to two adjacent void spawn. They collapsed like puppets with their strings cut, and the Alpha let out a roar that shattered windows for kilometers around. "It's working!" Lyra shouted over the noise. "The creature's losing cohesion!" But the Alpha wasn't finished. It had realized that it was under attack, and its massive head turned toward their building. Eyes like burning stars focused on their position, and tentacles began reaching in their direction. "We need to move," Thok warned. "That thing knows where we are." Marcus didn't budge from his position. He was in what snipers called the zone, a state of perfect focus where time seemed to slow down and every shot was inevitable. He could see the energy patterns, understand the network structure, and identify exactly which targets would cause maximum disruption. His fourth shot took out a node that was apparently crucial to the Alpha's mobility. The creature's legs gave out, and it crashed to the ground with an impact that registered on seismic monitors across the planet. "How did you know?" Vex 9 demanded. "Pattern recognition," Marcus replied, already lining up his fifth shot. "Same way a hunter tracks wounded prey. You learn to read the signs." The Alpha was wounded but not defeated. It began dragging itself forward using its tentacles, each movement leaving deep furrows in the corrupted ground. But with each of Marcus's shots, more of its support network collapsed. The smaller void spawn were dying faster than they could redistribute the energy load. "The communication array," Lyra pointed toward their objective. The Alpha was heading directly for it. It must have known we were coming. "Void spawn learn," Thok confirmed. "They adapt not just physically but tactically. This was an ambush." Marcus's eighth shot finished the job. The Alpha-class creature let out one final roar before its massive form began to dissolve, breaking apart into component energy that dissipated into the atmosphere. The remaining small void spawn scattered, no longer held together by the Alpha's organizing presence. "Remarkable shooting," Vex 9 admitted as they climbed down from their vantage point. "You eliminated a threat that would have required orbital bombardment to stop. And you did it with a weapon that our databases classify as obsolete technology," Lyra added. As they made their way toward the communication array, Marcus noticed that his teammates' attitude toward him had completely changed. Instead of treating him like a primitive curiosity, they were asking genuine questions about human tactical doctrine and weapons development. "Tell me," Thok said as they navigated through the ruins, "do all human soldiers receive this level of training?" "Different specializations," Marcus explained. "I'm a designated marksman, long-range precision shooting, but every human soldier learns basic marksmanship. We believe that if you're going to carry a weapon, you should know how to use it effectively." "Fascinating," Vex 9 mused. "Most galactic species rely entirely on technology to compensate for individual skill limitations. Automated targeting systems, guided projectiles, area effect weapons. The concept of personal accuracy seems almost primitive." "There's that word again," Marcus smiled. "You keep using it, but I don't think it means what you think it means." They reached the base of the communication array without encountering additional resistance. The tower stretched up into the gray sky, its surface covered in the same black corruption that had consumed the rest of the planet. But the structure was still functional. They could see lights blinking at various levels, indicating active systems. "The main data core should be on the 50th level," Lyra reported, checking her scanner. "But the lifts are non-functional. We'll have to climb." "50 floors?" Thok groaned. This is going to take hours." As they entered the tower's base level, Marcus noticed something that made him stop. "Wait," he said, raising his hand. "Listen." They stood in silence for a moment. The tower was completely quiet except for the hum of electronics and the whisper of air circulation. But Marcus had heard something else, the subtle sound of movement high above them. "We're not alone in here," he said quietly. Vex 9 checked his scanner. "I'm not detecting any life signs." "Void spawn don't always register as life signs," Marcus pointed out. "They're energy constructs, remember?" As if in response to his words, a sound echoed down from the upper levels, a clicking, chittering noise that made everyone's skin crawl. It was the sound of void spawn communication, but unlike any variant they had encountered before. "Hunter-killers," Thok identified grimly. "Void spawn specialized for indoor combat. They can climb walls and ceilings, and they're designed to hunt in confined spaces." Through the stairwell that spiraled up the center of the tower, they could see shapes moving in the shadows above. The creatures were descending toward them, their movements eerily coordinated. "How many?" Marcus asked, shouldering his rifle. Lyra's scanner finally picked up the signatures. "At least 20, maybe more. In a confined space like this, my plasma cannons will be limited," Thok admitted. "Too much risk of causing structural damage. And particle beams might overload the tower's electronics," Vex 9 added. "We need the systems intact to download the data." Marcus studied the stairwell through his scope. The hunter-killers were still several floors above them, but they were moving fast. In a few minutes, the team would be facing multiple enemies in close quarters, with limited room to maneuver. "New plan," he announced. "You three head up the stairs. I'll provide overwatch from down here." "That's suicide," Lyra protested. "You can't hold off 20 hunter-killers by yourself." Marcus was already moving to a position that gave him a clear field of fire up the stairwell. "I don't need to hold them off. I just need to thin them out before they reach you." "Human," Thok said seriously. "If you fall, we'll be trapped up there with no way down." Marcus chambered around and smiled. "Then I guess I better not fall." The first hunter-killer appeared at the edge of his scope's field of view. It was smaller than the pack hunters they had faced outside, but more agile. Its body was designed for speed and stealth, with retractable claws that allowed it to cling to any surface. Marcus's first shot took its center mass, and the creature tumbled down the stairwell like a broken toy. "Go!" he called to his teammates. "I'll keep them busy." As the others began climbing, Marcus settled into a rhythm that was as old as warfare itself. Target acquisition, range estimation, wind compensation, trigger squeeze. Each shot was deliberate, precise, and final. The hunter-killers quickly realized that the stairwell had become a killing ground. They tried different approaches, climbing on the outer walls, attempting to flank through elevator shafts, even trying to drop from above using their climbing abilities. But Marcus had fought in urban environments before. He understood how to use architecture as a force multiplier, how to create choke points and kill zones. Every human soldier learned these lessons, passed down from the street fighting of ancient cities to the close-quarters battles of modern warfare. "10th floor," came Lyra's voice through the quantum communicator. "Still climbing." "Copy," Marcus replied, dropping another hunter-killer with a perfect headshot. "Take your time. I've got plenty of ammunition." That was when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The hunter-killers had stopped their direct assault and were now moving in formation, surrounding the base of the tower. They were coordinating with something else, something bigger. Through the tower's transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see movement in the ruins outside. More Alpha-class creatures were approaching, along with entire swarms of smaller void spawn. The tower was being surrounded by an army. "Guys!" he called into his communicator. "We have a problem." Marcus watched through the tower's windows as the void spawn army assembled outside. 3 Alpha-class creatures approached from different directions, each one accompanied by hundreds of smaller variants. The entire planet seemed to be converging on their location. How did they know we were here? Vex 9's voice crackled through the quantum communicator from somewhere high above. They didn't, Marcus replied, studying the enemy formations through his scope. They're here for the same reason we are. This communication array isn't just a data storage facility. It's broadcasting something. Broadcasting what? Thok demanded. Marcus had been wondering the same thing since they'd arrived. The tower was still active despite the void spawn corruption covering its exterior. More importantly, the creatures seemed drawn to it rather than trying to destroy it. I don't know, he admitted. But whatever it is, they want it intact. That's why they're surrounding us instead of just bringing the tower down. 20th floor, Lyra reported. The corruption is getting thicker up here. It's like the entire building is being transformed from the inside out. Through his scope, Marcus could see that the void spawn weren't just waiting outside. They were taking positions, setting up what looked like a siege. The hunter-killers inside the tower had also stopped their direct assault and were now moving to block all possible exit routes. They're not trying to kill us, Marcus realized. They're trying to capture us. What? Vex 9's voice spiked with alarm. That's impossible. Void spawn don't take prisoners. These ones do, Marcus said grimly. Look at their formation, classic encirclement tactics. They want us alive for something. As if to confirm his assessment, one of the Alpha-class creatures began emitting a deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the tower's structure. It wasn't the random roaring they'd heard before. This was communication. The creature was giving orders. 30th floor, Thok reported. I'm seeing something strange up here. The corruption isn't random. It's forming patterns, like circuitry. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's dying atmosphere. The void spawn aren't just consuming this planet, they're converting it, turning it into some kind of massive processing center. Processing what? Lyra asked. Before anyone could answer, the quantum communicator in Marcus's hands began displaying data streams. Information was flowing through the device at impossible speeds, terabytes of data being transmitted from somewhere high in the tower. The communication array, Marcus breathed. It's not just storing data about void spawn movements, it's broadcasting intelligence about galactic defense positions, fleet movements, population centers, everything. A spy network, Vex 9 said with dawning horror. The void spawn have been using this planet as a listening post. They know everything about our defenses. The tactical situation suddenly became clear to Marcus. The void spawn weren't trying to kill them because they needed the intelligence data in their equipment. Every member of Strike Force Omega carried classified information about galactic defense systems. If the creatures could extract that data... 40th floor, Lyra called. I can see the main data core, but there's something else up here. The corruption has formed into what looks like a massive biological computer. It's actively processing information. How long to download the intelligence data? Marcus asked. At least 10 minutes to get everything. But Marcus, the void spawn formations outside are moving. I think they're preparing to assault the tower. Marcus checked his ammunition. He had perhaps 20 rounds left, nowhere near enough to hold off an army. But as he studied the enemy positions, he began to see possibilities that his alien teammates would never consider. Listen carefully, he said into the communicator. I need you to trust me completely. When I give the signal, I want you to overload every energy weapon you have and fire them directly into the tower's central support column. Are you insane? Thok roared. That will bring down the entire structure. With us in it, Vex 9 added. Not if you time it right, Marcus replied. He was already moving, heading for the tower's maintenance access. I'm going to create a distraction. When you see the fireworks, count to 30 and then blow the support column. The tower will collapse, but it'll fall away from the communication array. You'll have maybe 60 seconds to download the data before the whole structure comes apart. What about you? Lyra asked. Marcus was climbing through a maintenance shaft that led to the tower's exterior. "I'll be fine. Just stick to the plan." The maintenance shaft opened onto a service platform on the tower's 20th floor, giving Marcus a perfect vantage point overlooking the Void Spawn army. Through his scope, he could see the creature's command structure clearly now. The 3 Alpha-class creatures were positioned at the points of a triangle around the tower, with smaller creatures arrayed in precise formations between them. But Marcus had noticed something that the creatures apparently hadn't considered. The corrupted ground beneath their feet wasn't solid. It was a thin shell covering the planet's original surface, and that original surface included a network of underground utility tunnels filled with natural gas and electrical systems. Marcus smiled and loaded a very special round into his rifle. It was something he'd been saving for an emergency, an incendiary round designed to ignite almost anything it touched. "Ready?" he asked into his communicator. "Ready," came the chorus of replies from above. Marcus took careful aim at a specific point on the corrupted ground, where his military training told him a gas main would be located. The shot had to be perfect. Too shallow, and it wouldn't penetrate to the utilities. Too deep, and it would lose its incendiary effect. He squeezed the trigger. The incendiary round punched through the corrupted surface and struck the gas main exactly where Marcus had calculated. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the entire area around the Eastern Alpha-class creature erupted in a pillar of flame that reached halfway to orbit. The explosion was followed by a chain reaction as other utility lines ignited. The ground beneath the Void Spawn army began collapsing into sinkholes and chasms, while jets of flame shot up at random intervals across the entire area. The creature's perfect formation dissolved into chaos as they tried to escape the inferno. The Alpha-class creatures roared in confusion and pain as the flames disrupted their energy fields. "Now!" Marcus shouted into his communicator. High above, his teammates opened fire with every weapon they had: plasma cannons, particle beam rifles, and crystalline energy blades, all discharged simultaneously into the tower's central support column. The quantum-reinforced structure held for exactly 30 seconds before catastrophic failure set in. The tower began to fall with the slow majesty of a giant redwood. Marcus rappelled down his maintenance cable as the structure collapsed around him, timing his descent to land on solid ground just as the tower's upper levels crashed into the ruins beyond the communication array. Through the smoke and debris, he could see his teammates using emergency anti-gravity packs to escape from the collapsing structure. Lyra had the quantum communicator in her hands, its display showing that the data download was complete. But they weren't safe yet. The surviving Void Spawn were regrouping, and one of the Alpha-class creatures was moving toward their position. It was wounded and enraged, its energy field crackling with barely controlled power. Marcus checked his ammunition. 5 rounds left. Not enough to repeat his previous tactics, but possibly enough for something even more audacious. "Vex 9, he called as his teammates landed near him. "I need you to use your scanner to map that creature's energy distribution." "What are you planning?" the Saurian demanded, but he complied with the request. "Energy weapons can't penetrate its hide because it absorbs and redirects the energy," Marcus explained, studying the scanner data. "But what if we could cause it to absorb too much energy at once?" "Overload?" Thok's eyes widened in understanding. "You want to force-feed it more power than its system can handle." "Exactly. But I need all 3 of you to fire your weapons at the same time at the same target point. Can you do that?" "Where?" Lyra asked. Marcus was studying the creature through his scope, watching the patterns of energy flowing across its massive form. There was a point just behind its head where several energy streams converged, a natural weakness in its power distribution system. "Right there," he indicated. "When I take my shot, you have exactly 2 seconds to hit that same spot with everything you have." "2 seconds?" Vex 9 protested. "That's impossible. We can't coordinate that precisely." Yes, you can, Marcus said calmly. You just need to trust human timing. The Alpha-class creature was now only 50 meters away, its tentacles reaching toward them like grasping fingers. Its eyes blazed with hatred and intelligence, and Marcus could see that it understood exactly what had happened to its army. Marcus took a deep breath and entered the zone one final time. The world around him seemed to slow down as he calculated distance, wind speed, and bullet drop. His target wasn't the creature's hide. It was a specific point where a depleted uranium round could disrupt the energy flow just long enough to create a vulnerable opening. He squeezed the trigger. The round struck the creature's energy convergence point with perfect precision, causing a brief disruption in its power field. For exactly 2 seconds, a small section of its hide became vulnerable to energy weapons. "Now!" Marcus shouted. His 3 teammates fired simultaneously. Plasma cannon rounds, particle beam bursts, and crystalline energy bolts all converged on the same point that Marcus's bullet had weakened. The Alpha-class creature's own energy field, instead of protecting it, began feeding the incoming attacks. The result was spectacular. The creature's entire power system overloaded in a cascade failure that lit up the landscape like a miniature star going nova. When the light faded, there was nothing left but a crater and the fading echoes of the creature's final roar. The surviving void spawn, leaderless and confused, scattered into the ruins. The immediate threat was over. "Incredible," Vex 9 said, staring at the crater. "You used our weapons against the creature by timing your shot to create a vulnerability window. How did you calculate the precise timing?" "Human intuition," Marcus replied. "And a lot of practice." Thok picked up Marcus's rifle and examined it with new respect. "I owe you an apology, human. I called your weapon primitive, but I was wrong. This isn't primitive technology. It's perfected technology." "There's a difference," Lyra agreed. "Advanced doesn't always mean better. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective." Marcus reloaded his rifle and looked around at the devastated landscape. "We need to get out of here. That explosion will have been visible from orbit. Every void spawn on the planet will be converging on this location." "Our extraction point is 20 kilometers north," Vex 9 reported. "But with the void spawn presence, it might as well be on another planet." "No problem," Marcus said, shouldering his rifle. "I know a few tricks about moving undetected through hostile territory. Another human specialty." As they began their trek across the corrupted landscape, Thok fell into step beside Marcus. "Tell me, human, Marcus, how many others like you does your species have?" Marcus thought about the billions of humans back on Earth, each one carrying the same hunting instincts and survival skills that had been refined over millions of years of evolution. "All of us," he replied simply. "Every single one of us." The implications of that statement weren't lost on his alien teammates. They had always viewed humanity as a primitive species that had somehow stumbled into galactic society through luck and determination. But now they understood the truth. Humans weren't primitive. They were apex predators who had never stopped being apex predators, even after leaving their homeworld. They had simply adapted their hunting skills to a larger playing field. "The void spawn won't know what hit them when your species joins the war effort," Lyra observed. Marcus smiled as he led them through the ruins toward safety. "They're about to find out why humans don't just survive, we thrive. It's what we do." Behind them, the communication array continued broadcasting its data to the Galactic Defense Forces. The intelligence they had downloaded would give the GDC a crucial advantage in the coming war. But more importantly, they had proven that sometimes the old ways were indeed the best ways. In a galaxy full of energy weapons and automated systems, there was still room for a human with a rifle and the skill to use it. The void spawn had adapted to counter advanced technology, but they had never encountered the simple, elegant lethality of human ballistic weapons. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way. As Strike Force Omega disappeared into the ruins, heading for extraction, Marcus Chen allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had done his job, saved his team, and completed the mission. More importantly, he had shown the galaxy that humanity belonged among the stars, not as junior partners or primitive curiosities, but as the apex predators they had always been. The hunt was over, but the war was just beginning. And the Void's spawn were about to discover why humans had never stopped being the most dangerous species in the galaxy.